Imagine a civilization so advanced, so powerful, that when it finally vanished, it took every trace of itself with it. No ruins, no graves, no survivors. Just a story passed down through 2,500 years, whispered by philosophers and obsessed over by explorers, scientists, and dreamers who all asked the same haunting question. Was Atlantis real? Today, we're going to do something most videos on this topic won't. We're not going to just tell you the legend. We're going to follow the evidence, the geology, the archaeology, the ancient texts, and we're going to let you decide what really happened to the most famous lost city in human history. The story of Atlantis doesn't come from some dusty myth handed down by illiterate villagers. It comes from one of the greatest minds the ancient world ever produced, Plato. The year was approximately 360 BC. Plato, the Athenian philosopher, wrote 2 dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, and in them he describes something extraordinary, a mighty island empire located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar, sitting in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And this wasn't a small place. Plato described Atlantis as larger than Libya and Asia Minor combined, a nation of kings, a civilization of breathtaking architecture, temples plated in gold and silver, harbors filled with warships, a royal palace at the center of perfectly concentric rings of water and land, like a bullseye carved into the sea. The Atlanteans, according to Plato, were the descendants of the god Poseidon himself. Blessed with divine blood, they built a society of unparalleled wealth and wisdom. For generations, they lived in harmony, noble, just enlightened. But then something changed. Plato writes that as their divine nature was diluted through the generations, the Atlanteans became greedy, corrupt, drunk on power. They began to conquer neighboring lands, pushing into the Mediterranean, threatening Egypt and Athens. And that's when the gods lost patience. Zeus, seeing their corruption, convened a council of the gods to decide their fate. And in a single catastrophic event, one terrible day and night, Atlantis was swallowed by the sea, an entire civilization gone, submerged beneath the waves as if it had never existed. That was Plato's story. And for more than 2,000 years, humanity has never quite been able to let it go. Now here's where things get genuinely fascinating. Because when researchers started looking for physical evidence, they didn't find nothing. They found too much. The sonar anomaly off Gibraltar. In 2011, a team of researchers led by Professor Richard Freund from the University of Hartford used satellite imagery and deep ground radar to survey a vast marshland in southern Spain. The Diana National Park near Cadiz. What they found stunned them. Buried beneath the marshes were the outlines of what appeared to be a massive city. Concentric rings, just as Plato described, along with smaller cities in the surrounding area that may have been built by refugees. Could this be it? Could Atlantis have been located not in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, but just beyond the Pillars of Hercules? Exactly where Plato said, the team couldn't excavate fully. The site is a protected natural reserve. But the satellite data remains, quietly waiting. The Bronze Age collapse. Around 1200 BC, roughly 900 years before Plato wrote, the Mediterranean world suffered one of the most dramatic collapses in human history. Entire civilizations vanished almost simultaneously. The Mycenaeans, the Hittites, the Minoans were already gone. Massive cities were burned and abandoned. Trade networks collapsed. Writing systems disappeared. Historians call it the Late Bronze Age collapse, and to this day, its cause remains genuinely mysterious. Some combination of climate change, drought, earthquakes, and mysterious sea peoples, raiders whose origins are still debated, seems to have shattered the ancient world. Is it possible that one of those lost civilizations was Atlantis? That Plato's story was a cultural memory, distorted by centuries of retelling, of a real catastrophe that really did swallow an advanced civilization? The Minoan connection. Perhaps the most compelling piece of physical evidence points to the Greek island of Santorini, ancient Thera. Around 1600 BC, the volcanic island of Thera erupted in one of the most violent explosions in recorded geological history. The eruption was 4 times more powerful than Krakatoa. It generated tsunamis over 150 feet tall that crashed into coastlines across the eastern Mediterranean. The island essentially collapsed into the sea, leaving the crescent-shaped caldera that Santorini occupies today. The civilization that flourished there, the Minoans, was extraordinary. Sophisticated art, indoor plumbing, multi-story buildings, a naval empire that dominated the Aegean, and then, quite suddenly, it declined. The timing and the geography are striking. Plato places Atlantis 9,000 years before his own time, but many scholars believe this could be a decimal error or deliberate obscuring, and that the real timeline is 900 years, which lands almost perfectly on the Duran eruption, a civilization on an island, wiped out by a catastrophic geological event, its memory echoing forward through centuries of oral tradition until Plato gave it a name. So what do the experts actually believe? Let's lay out the major camps. Theory 1. It's pure fiction, a philosophical thought experiment. Many serious classical scholars argue that Atlantis was never meant to be taken literally. Plato was, above all else, a philosopher, and he used allegory and invented narratives throughout his work to make moral and political arguments. In this reading, Atlantis is a cautionary tale about the dangers of hubris and imperialism. Athens, in the story, defeats Atlantis before it sinks, positioning Athens as a virtuous civilization, the model republic. Its propaganda, essentially, beautifully written, enduringly compelling propaganda. Plato never mentions Atlantis outside these two dialogues. None of his contemporaries reference it as a real place. And crucially, Plato's own student Aristotle reportedly dismissed the story entirely, saying that the man who invented Atlantis also destroyed it. Theory 2. It's a distorted memory of a real event. This is the middle ground, and it's where a surprising number of geologists, archaeologists, and historians quietly land. The idea is that Plato, or his source material, was drawing on genuine cultural memories of real catastrophes, real lost civilizations, filtered through centuries of retelling. The Duran eruption, the Bronze Age collapse, perhaps the flooding of the Black Sea thousands of years earlier, when the Mediterranean broke through into what was once a vast freshwater lake, swallowing the coastlines where people lived. Human memory is long. Trauma echoes, and the ancient world was full of scribes and priests whose entire purpose was to preserve the past, even when time had warped it beyond recognition. Theory 3. It was real, and we haven't found it yet. This is a view of the committed searchers, and there are more of them than you might expect. They point to Plato's obsessive geographic and architectural detail, the precise measurements, the specific metals, including the mysterious orichalcum, which Plato said covered Atlantis' walls. Remarkably, in 2015, metal ingots were recovered from a shipwreck off the coast of Sicily, identified by researchers as orichalcum, a zinc-copper alloy that was considered extraordinarily rare in the ancient world. They point to the fact that our knowledge of the ancient ocean floor is genuinely incomplete. Less than 25% of the ocean has been mapped in high resolution. There are mountains down there we've never seen, valleys we've never explored. If a civilization existed on a continental shelf that was later submerged by rising sea levels after the last ice age, for example, we might simply not have looked in the right place yet. Some researchers point to the Azores, volcanic islands in the mid-Atlantic that may be the peaks of a much larger landmass. Others look at the Caribbean, at the famous Bimini Road, a formation of flat, rectangular stones discovered off the Bahamian coast in 1968 that some researchers believe could be a man-made structure. Official geology says it's a natural formation. Not everyone is convinced. Here's what we know for certain. Plato wrote about Atlantis. He described in extraordinary detail. And no matter how many centuries pass, humanity cannot stop looking for it. Why? Maybe because we want to believe that civilization is older and deeper than we know. That somewhere beneath the waves, there's proof that we've been here before, that great societies rose and fell long before our history books began. Maybe the search for Atlantis is really the search for ourselves, for some lost version of human potential that we're still trying to reclaim. Or maybe, and this is a thought that keeps researchers up at night, maybe Plato was simply telling the truth. Maybe Atlantis existed. Maybe something catastrophic destroyed it. And maybe the evidence is still out there, under the sand or the sea, waiting for the right technology, the right expedition, the right moment to finally come to light. The ocean is not finished giving up its secrets. And Atlantis, whatever it was, a place, a memory, a warning, a dream, refuses to stay buried. If this story fascinated you even half as much as it fascinates me, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Do you think Atlantis was real? Was it there? Was it somewhere we haven't looked yet? Or was Plato just a very convincing storyteller? And if you want to go deeper, I put together a reading list in the description below. Actual books and research papers by real geologists and historians who are still actively investigating this mystery. Hit subscribe if you want more videos like this. We cover the world's greatest mysteries, lost civilizations, and the questions that history left unanswered. And we treat them with the seriousness they deserve. The past is stranger than you think. I'll see you in the next one.